Hey guys, I'm Kerwin.
And this is Jeffrey.
We are the Donis brothers or Donis twins. I'm just going to start saying that, honestly. So today we're talking about where the rich store their wealth and protect it. And honestly, we've learned a lot going to a lot of events. We invest a lot of money into masterminds and conferences and things like that to learn from people who are levels and steps above us, so we can learn from that because I don't know. I think it's important to invest in your network.
Yeah, the most important thing you can do is invest in yourself. Right?
Exactly.
So that's what we're doing when we go to these events.
And one of the principles and lessons that I've learned is how the rich treat their wealth and where they store their wealth, and how that differs from what we were taught and what we learned throughout life. Yep. We just from some context, we grew up low income, so I wouldn't consider it like poor. I think poor is whatever. We're going to talk about that, but. We grew up low income, and so we weren't taught certain things. That's no one's fault. But we were big on self-education. The traditional education system, it didn't teach us certain things, but that's okay because a lot of it was free. And we learned it through YouTube, books, and conferences and podcasts, like we said. So, Jeffrey, just start off the conversation. Where would you say people with a poor mindset and maybe some just people that maybe don't have a lot of wealth, where do they spend their money?
Liabilities, and just to define that, things that don't put money back in your pocket. It could be like a really expensive car, it could be vacations, it could be clothes, it could be food, hotels, whatever, like things like that are more not necessarily an investment and not going to give you a return.
Well, the difference between an asset and a liability, Robert Kiyosaki, you see him up there, he's up there on the chimney there, but he talks about the difference between an asset and a liability. So an asset puts money in your pocket, and a liability takes money out of your pocket. There's different definitions for that, and let us know if you agree or disagree down below.
One time I remember we were in like agriculture. It was a class in high school.
I remember that.
And one of my teachers told me, and I won't say any names. I didn't have like the financial education that I now have. I'm still learning a lot, obviously, but at that time, I had never read any books like about financial literacy and all that. So she mentioned the definition of an asset. I think she said that an asset was she said, what was it?
I wasn't there.
I think it was like a house is an asset, which is obviously arguable, but that was the first thing. She said your house is an asset.
Well, the reason that it's arguable, just for clarity,
what was the definition of like in like the school terms?
I think it's just I honestly don't remember what she said. That was a while ago. Point is, and he brought up the house, so we have to. If I have a feeling some of you are going to reach out and be like, oh, house is an asset. So let me just explain what he meant.
Yeah.
And will you explain what you
meant? The house that you live in.
Yes.
That you live in, and you're
because it doesn't put money in your pocket every month. That is the definition that Robert Kiyosaki has emphasized throughout his career, and that is the one that aligns with our investment philosophy. So assets put money in your pocket, and liabilities take money out. Just for simplicity.
And it's perfectly fine to have a house that you live in.
Yeah, no,
everything has to be an asset.
And actually, we'll talk about that because one of the biggest expenses of people maybe that don't have, I would say the people who aren't wealthy, one of their biggest expenses is rent. Because if they can't afford to buy a house, they buy liabilities like cars and then electronics, but they also have to pay rent at somewhere they're not building wealth or equity. And that's, I think, why the argument for a home being an asset kind of comes from. You're able to build equity and you can take it out and kind of multiply your money that way. So it really, let us know. We're not acting like we know everything. If you guys disagree, let us know down below.
Yeah.
So the people that aren't wealthy, they don't invest their money in assets because they don't have enough to invest, and maybe they lack the education. And just to be like what's the phrase? Devil's advocate. That's it. To be the devil's advocate, we will say we didn't come from any money, honestly. Like we were poor growing up, and we have been able to build some wealth, and we are on the path to build more wealth, and that's our plan. So I would say more so stems from the lack of education, because education is what has helped us build wealth, and we didn't have really the money. So I think even if you start from the place of no money with enough education and hustle, you can build it, and it's possible. It is possible. Of course, it's not easy. No one's saying it is. If you start the race at different spots as other people, but that's life. Just accept it and educate yourself and move on. So I want to kind of break it down. So maybe the least wealthy people, they lack the education and lack the money. The middle class, I'm just kind of trying to paint the picture of where they spend their money. Yeah. So the middle class, they pay for their expenses, their living expenses, and then they also invest in a lot of liabilities. They'll buy really nice houses and nice cars, nice trips. Nothing wrong with that, but that is where their money goes, and typically none of that puts money in their pocket every month. Boats, cars, houses, things like that. They're very hands-off with their money and wealth as well. And this is something that is going to be a hot take. I've had multiple financial advisors on our podcast, the Real Estate Monopoly podcast. Check it out if you want. And a lot of them have said that the industry they teach, the financial advisors are taught by the same companies and organizations that who's like, for example, mutual funds. They're being trained. The curriculum that is used to train them is the same people whose products they're selling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so
there's like a bias. Like, of course, they're going to advocate for
there's an alignment
their clients.
Of interest for them to get their.
They get a commission for selling you those investments. So instead of saying, "Hey, go buy a rental," they say, "No, buy this mutual fund because I'm going to get a commission off of it." No, they don't say that, but that's kind of their motivation. And so I don't know if everyone knows that. Not only that, but that's kind of what they're taught. So they're not taught about real estate or other ways of building wealth. They're taught to invest in the opposite of hard assets. And so that's kind of what a lot of people in the middle class, that's what they do. They are very hands-off and they kind of outsource the management of their money and their wealth. And the wealthy don't do that. The wealthy are kind of more
hands-on.
Yeah, hands-on, exactly. And so the wealthy, what they do is they still have expenses and liabilities, of course, because they have to live and they want nice things. But they also invest in assets and they have the education. So they're very big on self-education.
Yep. The poor work for money. The wealthy have their money work for them.
Yes.
So
yeah, we're just for conversation's purpose, we're going to say the wealthy and then the not wealthy. But the not wealthy, they do work for money, and that's going to a job, 9 to 5, getting paid hourly, whereas the wealthy have their money work for them. And of course, at some point, they probably had to work for money to get that money. But the key difference is they take that money and invest it in something that will multiply it. So, for example, I don't know if you want to help me with this example, but if you make money and then you invest it in a real estate property, and then you go in and fix up the property, and this is just like a house. So let's say you fix up the house, and then the area naturally appreciates over time. The value of the property will increase. So the initial money you used to buy the house, in like 10 years, let's say, your money will have grown in that asset, and it also hedged against inflation, because it's in a hard asset that rises in value as inflation rises, and inflation has been rising lately. So that's just kind of an example of how the wealthy not only protect their wealth, but grow it.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't have to go specifically, but you're just building equity as that property value raises and goes up. You are building your equity, meaning that if you were to sell that house that you initially bought and fixed up, you are now into it for whatever amount you spent.
Yep.
Over time, that amount that if you were to sell it, in the money that you'd walk away with in your pocket, that amount goes up as the value goes up.
100%. And Robert Kiyosaki, Ken McElroy, they both talk about the velocity of money. And I think, Jeff, if you want to help me with the example, but I'll kind of define it. And so the definition of the velocity of money, I guess, at least how they have explained it, is if you want to be rich, you need to keep your money moving. And the velocity of your money determines the size of your wealth. So that's rich dad, poor dad. And I think for us, our plan is to make money through real estate investing and then take that money and dump it back into real estate. And Jeffy, I don't know if you want to like paint the picture, but how is it possible to use real estate to take a fixed amount of money that you have at the beginning and then multiply it over time?
Yeah. So let's go back to that house example. If let's say I buy it, and there's a lot of strategies, but the one I'm going to refer to is the Burr strategy. Eventually, say you buy it and then you put the money in, and now you're at the point 1 year in or 2 years in, where the property value has gone up because the area is increasing in value, like properties are selling for more, and now your property is worth more after you do those renovations. You've rented it for a little bit. You've cash flowed now, or not cash flowed, but you have some money coming in every single month for the 2 years that you were holding the property. When you go to the bank and try to get a refinance, which we can define in another video, now you can pull out some of your equity and then go and you still own this property, but now there's just more debt on it, which is a good thing. There's a difference between good debt and bad debt. This would be in this case good debt as long as you're cash flowing. Now you own this property, you're still making cash flow every single month from it, and then you go and take that equity and you can go and put a down payment on another house. So now you have 2 houses that are producing cash flow, hopefully, if you did it correctly. And that's how you're multiplying the wealth, because initially you started with this single amount of money. Now you started with 1 house, and now you have 2, and then a year later you do the same exact thing. You refinance both or one of them, and then you do the same thing again. And then eventually, let's say you sell all of them, all 3 houses, and now you have $1 million, right? Now you can go down and get a $5 million property. It could be like a quadplex, a triplex, maybe even like a 6-unit, depending on what market you're in. Now you're just scaling like that. And then on that 6-unit, you go in, refinance, do the same exact strategy, pull that money out, and then go buy another property. And then you sell both, and then you get into like a 100-unit property.
Yep.
You know, so that's how it works.
And each time you're increasing this, adding to your portfolio or growing it, you're also growing your cash flow. And so the cash flow, you're typically not taxed on it. And you also, that's what you can live off of, Yeah,
you're getting cash flow. It depends on how you're structuring it, but the cash flow could literally pay for all your expenses and more. So now,
and you're growing equity in the property. If you're doing it right, you're getting equity in the property. So you can just keep buying more real estate. And at that point, that's why a lot of investors say it's like a game at that point, because
it's like Monopoly.
Yes, because once you're out of the gates and you kind of pass the initial curve, at that point you already have money. You're just the name of the game is just growing it,
multiplying it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why the velocity of money. That's kind of what they talk about. And so I wanted to draw a contrast between how the middle class, typically the path they take to achieve their financial goals, or at least the path they think will work. And it has worked for a lot of people, but I don't know if that'll be the case in the future. No one really knows. I would just rather take a proven path that has worked and aligns with our goals. And I think if you're watching this video, chances are you also will align with it as well. The middle class, the path they take, they work a job to get a salary, make money, and they pay a lot of taxes. Typically, if you're employed,
you have a lot of expenses.
You have a lot of expenses as well, but you also pay a lot of taxes. If you get a loan, you want to make a house purchase, maybe buy a car, you might want to take a loan out. And that's arguably an example of bad debt, because it's not going to put money in your pocket. And you also use your own money, the money you're working for, to pay off that debt, right? And so you're just kind of stuck in the cycle of debt. Whereas the rich and the wealthy, they build businesses. Through these businesses, they develop new skills, and then they also are big advocates for self-education. So they're self-educating themselves and learning things over time, learning new skills that can be used to develop and grow their business. And then they invest their profits from that business or multiple businesses in assets that will multiply their money. Of course, I'm not saying that the wealthy don't have liabilities and they don't have debt and they don't want to go out and get a house either. But I think this is the path they've taken. And a lot of times the key difference is that the wealthy, they take their money and invest in assets, whereas the middle class and lower classes will not do that. And they'll use their money on other things that don't put money in their pockets or multiply their money. And so, Jeffrey, just to kind of, I think a core difference between these two things is the mindset and the habits.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
No, I think, like everyone, I don't know if you asked me, but like, where do people initially get their financial habits from? I think, for us, the
parents.
It must come from at
parents
a
or
young
teachers.
age. Yeah. At a young age, it comes from whoever you were spending time with as a kid, whatever you saw growing up. Maybe your parents like to spend a lot of money, so you just thought it was normal to do that. And whatever you were surrounded by, most likely you're doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing, is understanding and being aware of what your current financial habits are. And then understanding where, maybe the way that we did it really was by, like you said, self-education, but also you surround yourself with people that are where you want to be, and then you ask them the questions, or you just see what their financial habits are, how they are using their money and how they're growing their wealth. And then you compare that to your current financial habits, and you understand where the difference is and how you're going to be able to get to where they are, and or implement the similar things that they did to grow their wealth. So that's the first step I would recommend.
Yeah, and Ken McElroy has said in the past, if you can change your habits, you can change results. And so that is what we are big believers in. We've developed good habits, and we're still developing them. They're still growing, but we're big believers in discipline can only go so far. The habits that you build throughout the day and throughout your life, that is what's going to develop and grow and get you closer to achieving those results.
Yeah.
So self-education, we have harped on that throughout the video, and that's one of the core themes of this video, self-education versus traditional education. I don't know about you guys or what school you went to, but schools I went to, no one taught me about financial education, real estate, building wealth, things like that. Not the teacher's fault though. Or I think it's not their fault because no one taught them and they didn't know. And they never were self-educated to develop that knowledge base.
I feel like we can't say all of them, but it's also not in the curriculum. Like that's not
true too.
They're told to teach us. So
yeah, exactly. And they only have a certain amount of time with us, and maybe that's a whole other topic about the school system. And we're not saying the school system is bad. We're just saying you have to take the initiative and take a kind of just have an internal locus of control. Like you are in control of your life. You can get out there and become self-educated about finances and investing in real estate if you want. And if you're watching this video, then you're already on the path to doing that. So that's awesome. And that's why it's so important. A lot of the wealthy, they don't stop learning even after schooling. They keep learning. They're self-educating. They're going to events, lifelong learners. They're learning about investing in real estate. And that's what you have to do. And it's never too early to start. That's also another misconception that really, really gets on my nerves. Honestly, a lot of people our age and younger, they think, oh, I have time and I can just take my time to do this. And that's not true. I mean, yes, you have time, but why would you wait? Like, and what are you doing with your time that would be maybe better used self-educating and learning and attending conferences, reading books and things like that? Just be aware, be honest with yourself. The wealthy and people that tend to be more successful in general tend to be more comfortable with the possibility of failure and risk. And a lot of times in school, and I keep talking about school, but this is where it comes from. There's a stigma against failure, and you want to get that good grade. The F is bad.
You want to be perfect. Yeah, you don't want to make any mistakes.
Exactly.
Especially like the way that we were. I mean, the way we went to school, you'd have to take a test. You'd study for the test, and you took the test, and if you didn't do well, you'd get a bad grade, and that would affect your score. So therefore, I would think like in a lot of ways, you just don't want to take a lot of risk because in real life, the risk is how you get the reward, but also it comes with failure, which is good because that way you learn. The next time maybe you won't fail. Yeah. But on a test, if you just don't want to, it's just like the way failure is a bad thing in school.
Yeah, and
the way that
fear
brought up.
Fear of failure keeps people from trying new things, and trying new things is how you grow. Not only your money, but yourself. And if you want to grow your money and your wealth, you have to try new things because chances are you're not doing it already. Yeah. Otherwise, you don't need to change anything. That wouldn't make sense. So self-education increases. As self-education increases, risk will decrease. And that's just because we've always talked about this. The more you know, the more you're able to mitigate risk, the more you're able to kind of insulate yourself. If something does come up, you kind of understand how to react. So it's better to be proactive than reactive. We can have a whole conversation on self-education. If you want us to do that, let us know down below. Now, really quickly, I did want to touch on the 3 tiers of wealth and the types of investments that people do, because a lot of people say, "Oh, I invest," and I'm savvy, and yeah, maybe they are. I don't know. Like, there's a difference though in types of investments, and we're not financial experts by any means, but we have self-educated, and this is something I've learned that I wanted to share with you guys. There's 3 tiers of wealth: the primary, secondary, and tertiary. And that's actually defined by Chris Martinson in a book, and I can't remember the book name, but there's 3 investment options. Like I said, primary. So primary is land, oil, timber, coal, and water. These are natural resources. Most people don't invest here. And this is, though, where all money and all wealth is created. And I'm going to explain why. So the secondary tier is business. And this is actually all outlined by Ken McElroy as well. This is, I'm citing my sources. Secondary tier is business. So oil businesses, timber businesses, these are businesses that take those primary resources essentially and create some kind of product out of them and sell them. So, they're in the middle. And then no business would exist without the resources derived from the primary. So just kind of think of it like there wouldn't be an oil business if you didn't have oil. Oil is primary. The secondary is the oil business. The tertiary is the paper investments. So these are bonds, derivatives, ETFs,
the stock market,
cash, and the stock market. Perfect. So you guys are probably starting to understand where we're getting at. That is kind of what we're trying to say. If you're investing in that tertiary, the reason that Jeffrey, why do you think it's the most risky?
Well, it's just the one that it's not a hard asset. It's not tangible. Land, exactly. As you mentioned, land, oil, all of those things come from something, and you can actually go and touch it. So that means that it's not easily manipulated. The value of it isn't as easily manipulated and isn't as volatile as things like paper assets, because those things can be manipulated by someone coming onto a podcast and doing something they probably shouldn't do, or saying something they probably shouldn't say. Whoever it is, it just that's how it can be easily manipulated versus a primary.
Yeah, and the wealthy, they invest mainly in the primary, because even when businesses go out of business, there's still going to be natural resources and demand for them. So there's going to be people that need that. We're going to need water, we're going to need oil, we're going to need gas, things like that.
Land.
And most people invest in the tertiary because they don't have the education that is required to understand the different tiers of investments. They also, this is, full circle, their advisors tell them, hey, invest in the tertiary, and they're paid commission for, selling those investments. So just be very cautious who you take advice from. Say, do they have wealth? Are they wealthy? Why would you take advice from someone who isn't in a place that you would, I wouldn't take advice real estate advice from someone who's never invested in real estate and is a chef. Like I would take cooking advice from a chef, but not real estate investing advice if they haven't invested in real estate.
Right, and that's why it's so important to understand where you're getting that knowledge from. Just first step is being aware, and then second step is educating yourself.
Yes.
And then as that happens, you'll start to realize kind of what you've been doing and maybe how you can do things differently.
100%.
And it all starts with really just surrounding yourself with that information.
Education. And that's why it is actually the most challenging and difficult and highest barrier to entry investment tier is the primary, because you need the education, and that's not always, it's readily available, but it's not obvious, and you have to do some research.
There's not as many people doing that as there are doing the tertiary.
Yeah, it's harder to find land than it is to go invest in a stock, for example.
You can buy a stock on your phone. And it's hard to buy a real estate. Exactly. You can buy it, I guess, but it's not easy.
To actually find something that's going to cash flow and be profitable, it's more challenging for sure. So it takes a little more effort, but it's definitely more worth it if you want to be intentional.
And if you're educated,
Exactly. So if you guys have any questions about that, let us know what your thoughts are on the primary, secondary, tertiary. Go check out Ken McElroy's video on that and watch the Chris Martinson. That's the author that talks about that. It's amazing resources there. And let us know if you have any questions or if you disagree or agree. We'd love to hear from you. Jeffrey, where can the people find us?
Yeah, we can. We're on all social media platforms at Donis Brothers. Check out our website, www.donisinvestmentgroup.com. Check out our podcast as well, The Real Estate Monopoly, if you're interested in just learning more about real estate or multifamily. And then you can find me on social media as well at Jeffrey Donis.
Yep, and I am at Donis Kerwin. And if you want to check out our 5 Common Investor Mistakes Playbook, you can find that at www.donisinvestmentgroup.com/playbook. Let us know what you guys thought about this episode. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Get out there, take action. Have a great day, guys.